Hello, welcome to Back to Coding. Today we'll be talking about what's new in Android Studio 4.0. Before we get started, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and the bell icon so that whenever I publish a video, you get notified instantly about it. First, let me tell you that the following content is completely taken from the Android Dev Summit's video, whose link is provided in the description below. And this is a short version of the same. At Google I/O 2019, Google launched Android Studio 3.5 into beta, where focus was on system health, feature polish, and bug backlog. Then in September 2019, Google launched Android Studio 3.6 into beta channel, which had things like view binding support, emulator with integrated Google Maps, design tools improvements, and Kotlin and JNI support. So in this Developer Summit, Google talked about Android Studio 4.0. To recap, Android Studio 3.5 focused on three main pillars: system health, feature polish, and bug backlog, which all as a whole was called Project Marble. And Project Marble included a number of smaller projects. The team worked on things like crashes, improvements to apply changes, CPU usage for emulator, and so on. Some improvements done by Project Marble are like improvements to the build speeds. Before Project Marble, the build speed was about 12.5 second average, and now it's 9.5 seconds. In Android Studio 3.3, 3.4 time frame, the build speed was stabilized, and with the Android Studio Gradle plugin 3.5, the build speed was actually decreased. So it is highly encouraged to move to Android Studio Gradle plugin 3.5 and take advantage of all the major improvements for build speed. Deployment speed is the time it takes for you to make a change on Android Studio and see it on a running device or an emulator. So the median before Project Marble was about 7.9 seconds and now it is about 3.6 seconds. And that was all around the feature called Apply Changes, which is nothing but instant run. So there were a number of improvements to the Project Marble. Some of the cool things that are going to be introduced in Android Studio 4.0 are Profiler for builds. After you have built a project, you now get a new build speed task, one for each build that you run, which gives us a breakdown about what happened during the build. For example, here we have a breakdown of all the tasks that determined the build duration, which shows us the tasks that are on the critical path. There is no point in trying to optimize a task that is not on the critical path, since even if you make it faster, you are still waiting for a longer task. Android Studio also gives you a breakdown for each plugin. As you can see here, there is a plugin which is taking up 40% of this build. This is a third-party license plugin which fetches license files over the network and inserts it into the help menu. But here we can say that we don't need it on every single debug build, so we can investigate and get into release builds. So this gives us an insight that we can then go and do something about it. Now we will be having a support for Kotlin Gradle TSL. That means you can write your build files in Kotlin, which is good for the IDE since it is statically typed, so the editor support is better. Library desugaring lets you access APIs that normally require a higher API level on an older API level, which is done here. The calls are rewritten into a backward library that is bundled with our app. For example, here we are using java.util.stream. And lint tells us that this is going to crash prior to API level 24, so you can't use it. Now if we turn on library desugaring, we can see lint is happy. The support for ProGuard files is improved. Now we have better code completion, we have goto declarations, and most important part is that it is now find usages and refactoring aware. For example, if we rename this class that happened to be referenced from a ProGuard file and we apply refactoring, you can see that the ProGuard file is also updated. So no more stale ProGuard files after this. View binding is very much like data binding, but it is easier to use and it has a smaller impact on your build speed. Once it is turned on, it will create a binding class for each one of our layouts. For example, here's a class that first does things in the classic way. We have a set content view where we are passing a layout resource. Then we go through this view hierarchy where we have these find methods. Then we apply cast that hopefully works and then we access those objects. So with view binding, what we do instead is we access or inflate the layout with this generated binding class. And now we get this binding instance which knows exactly which views are present in the layout. So in this case, text view is present in all versions of activity main. So that means that we know it's non-nullable and it's safe to access. We will have no null pointer exceptions with this one. View binding knows that button is actually missing from one of the layouts, so it's marked as nullable. And if we don't use Elvis operator, then Kotlin would refuse to compile. So view binding is great for catching nullness and it's also pretty good performance. View binding makes it really easy to access and update your views. This is Hello World from Compose. What we do here is we can take an existing composable or a widget and we can wrap it in our own function and customize it with some arguments. And as soon as we put a composable annotation on it, we have created our own widget. And we can also market it with this preview annotation and then it shows up in a preview pane inside the Kotlin file. We now have emulator embedded inside of IDE. It's not just simulating the app in isolation, we can see it in action in IDE itself. In Layout Inspector, we can click on several views and we can see their values, which we already had in the old Layout Inspector. But what new is this declared attributes section where we can see resources that are coming from binary resources or XML resources. For example, the label add plant, where is that coming from? Well, we can now expand that and we can see that it was actually specified in the layout file. And we can continue with whole execution stack and see the exact line and language that it came from. This layout inspector automatically gets updated with the changes if the live updates option is checked. And another cool thing about this inspector is that we can now drag it in 3D and see the full stack here. Isn't that pretty cool? Here we have a simple constraint layout and what we want is to animate this. So it's a bit more lively when this layout shows up. What we do here is we open up convert to motion layout, which will migrate our layout into a motion layout. Plus create a scene file which is going to store all the keyframes that we are about to create. First thing we can do is to select the start state. And then we start changing some of the constraints in the scene here, like deleting the top and bottom constraint of the text view to move the text to the top and also attaching button to the bottom. And now we have already created ourselves an animation. And now if we switch to transition view and hit play button, we can see the animation. So as you can see, we can really accomplish a lot with this tool. Resource Manager. The Android team has now updated the vector asset wizard with brand new clip art. So the materials design website has many icons which are added here, and most importantly, now there's support for all the different types. For example, we can switch from filled icons to outlined ones and so on. Some additional features include layout editor improvements. The Android team took the rendering libraries that we have on the devices and put them directly in the IDE. So things like Skia and ICU are now available inside of Android Studio. And what that enables is two important things: UI performance and having higher fidelity accuracy. So specifically things like improving text justification mode is now supported. Having detailed shadows or having 3D perspective or having text path rendering are now available inside of Layout Editor. Finally, to conclude, we talked about some things that are actually inside Android Studio 3.6, like the multi-display mode, design tools updates, and the IntelliJ update for 2019.2. And then things like the Jetpack Compose and motion editor support are inside of Android Studio 4.0, which is currently, that is October 2019, available in Canary release. That's it for this video. I hope you find it useful. Please give it a like if you find it useful and share it with the developer community. Don't forget to check my other videos which can be helpful to you.